Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Radium and today I have a very special video for all of you in which today I get to play one of my favourite games of recent times, Deltarune. Toby Fox and his objectively incredible games are fairly big contributors to this channel, as they shaped how I do my lore-based series and a fair amount of other content I produce, yet I've never actually had the luxury of playing any of these games on the channel. As the wait for Deltarune Chapter 2 was finally over, however, an idea came to me. I couldn't just do a normal playthrough of this game, I'm a challenge YouTuber, and even more than that, I'm persistent through challenges that deserve my effort, and so I questioned whether or not it would be possible to beat these games without taking any damage. Now, this may sound like a dumb question on the surface, since there have been no hits of the secret bosses of each chapter, and therefore nothing else in either of the chapters should be any harder than those fights, right? Well, if I've learned anything from the extreme no damage runs I've tried in the past, it's that these games are not designed to be beaten flawlessly, and so some unexpected obstacles could result in this run's demise. As of such, I decided that this run would be fun to attempt with certain rules. Firstly, I will be allowed to use save points in this run. I know this rule may be frowned upon, but simply put, I'm just not good enough to do everything in one take. And so, even if you don't believe this run to be very impressive, it's definitive proof of whether or not the run is possible. I can also save whenever I want, but if I get hit, then I will instantly Alt F4 and restart from my previous checkpoint. Secondly, I can play the game how I want. I'm opting for a pacifist route this time around, since I think it's harder 90% of the time, and the only harder part of going for an aggressive route would be in Chapter 2, which is facing Spamton Neo in the Snowgrave route. I can also fight and avoid any enemies I please, but I may not use glitches to skip bosses. Lastly, this video is going to be split into two segments, one for each chapter. This is because the video is already about 25 minutes long, only including everything in Chapter 1. Alright, that'll do, so with all of that said, let me explain the format of how I'll be presenting this playthrough. I've grouped the battle elements of the game into two categories, threats and battles. Threats are the bullet hell style gameplay where you can still see Chris underneath your soul, and you cannot act during these. Battles describe basically everything else the game has to throw at you, meaning any enemies, bosses, or mini-bosses you face on your journey. I won't be addressing every single encounter since some of them aren't even worth talking about, but I'll tell you all the difficulty of the dangers and how many resets it forces me to do. Anyways, the first few minutes of playtime are incredibly easy, literally because there's nothing that can kill you until you get to the Dark World. So, yeah, eventually, once you get down there, again, it's relatively smooth sailing for the first, couple minutes, and then your first threats start coming in. I should note again that this isn't going to be based on the incredible story of the game. I really enjoy the story, but I'm just not good at presenting that kind of thing. And personally, I feel like this format, where difficulty is the focus of the video, is way more comfortable for me personally. Additionally, I'm not exactly locking into a route because I know for a fact that Susie attacks enemies autonomously, at least until you get to near the end of the game. So that's not really going to be bothering me. Literally the only defining factor of this run is not getting hit. Anyways, Lance's first attack on the player is fairly easy to dodge. This is an example of a threat in case you were curious, because obviously you don't really have the ability to act on him. You kind of just dodge projectiles while running away, and yeah, I mean, this one in particular is very easy. There's not really too much of a chance you can die to it, but some of these obstacles do actually have the power to be very difficult, especially in Deltarune Chapter 2. You should be able to do this one without too much of an issue, but obviously obstacles like this have a very small chance of killing you in general. And, there's nothing much to it, but I should just mention now that if there's something worth talking about, then I will definitely bring it up. So, as well as being the first real threat, Lancer is also the first battle in this game. He has two very simple attacks, a simple charge of his bike, and then an arcing attack that fires 7 spade projectiles, again, fairly easy to dodge. And you don't really need to worry about dodging it too well, because you literally need to dodge these attacks twice, he repeats them, and then his bike runs out of fuel. And after this, of course, you unlock Rouse, a fairly important member of your party, since the Pacify ability and X-Flirt are going to be some of the most incredible moves for us. Additionally, I am going to be skipping some encounters like the Dummy, just because they're not mandatory fights and they don't contribute too much to the game. And yeah, now I'll be showing you one of the techniques we're going to be doing to make this run slightly easier, and it's a perfectly, viable method. I wouldn't consider it cheating, but as you can see, the Rudden attacks me. You can go back to where you were, and the enemy's position resets. This is simply because this enemy can actually be avoided, so you don't even need to enter the encounter. This is an example of dodging an enemy without, having to do it. And I perfectly, I consider it to be valid personally. However, some encounters obviously enough cannot be avoided. You'll see I try to dodge this one here. With not much success sadly, but I don't think it's possible to do anyways. And yeah, I mean, this is the first formal battle of the game, so this lance is kind of easy. Again, a lot of these battles early on are fairly simple, but I still want to include them for the sake of showing you guys what they're about. And also, a lot of these early fights, very, very easy and very quick battles. So you basically just talk to them, then they become tired, which makes them incredibly easy. And yeah, then you just pacify them twice, defend as Chris, use magic as Rouse, and then you're good with those battles. However, when there's a Haffy that you're against, everything becomes infinitely easier. Now, X-Flat is a move you could use whenever there's a Haffy, and as far as I understand, it will instantly make any of the enemies there spareable, at least at this stage in the game. So as you can see, I can spare both of them now, and that's another win. Here's another interesting little trick I found while fighting the 3 run-ins. Now, this is a fight that normally you have to dodge one normal attack, and then their attacks are unbalanced whilst there's, more than 2 of them. So you'll see here that their attacks are easy and unbalanced, and here's a little trick. If you spare one of them and defend with your other character, this attack still goes on, where the boss not the boss, sorry, but the enemies literally cannot hit you. So this allows you to spare both enemies without having, basically any chance of dying. Oh god, no, I'm so sorry, please. I'm so sorry. Okay, here we have Susie trying to bite Lance's face off before he says Merry Christmas, integral parts of the lore. And, fairly obvious, this is, it's an early encounter, right? So not going to be any threats. But what if I told you my first reset's here? Yeah, as embarrassing as it is, these Jigsaws, or however you pronounce that, kinda difficult. Now, this may sound stupid, it's a fairly easy attack to dodge in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, I got hit by that attack, and that warranted the first reset of the run. Now, I forgot how to deal with these guys entirely. I'm pretty sure you should just befriend them straight away. Susie knocks them out, so it's not really much of a threat. And their attacks become easier the less there are, if that makes sense. But instead, I had the idea that I was going, infinite pacifist at this stage, which I didn't settle on because it was boring. And after this turn, I managed to spare 2 of them. You'll see the attacks are indefinitely easier than they were before now. And yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums up this run. It's not very difficult, there's just a fair amount of problem solving involved. At least as long as you're not doing the secret bosses, which we'll get to in about 400 attempts. Anyways, while I was here, I decided to get a piece for the broken key. You're not supposed to get this until Card Castle, as far as I understand, but there's no harm in getting it. You're not exactly cheating if you get it at this stage. It's literally just something to do for the sake of making the rest of the game a little less painful. And actually, that's kind of ironic regarding how long Jebel's going to take me, but you guys will see that later. Anyways, we got another encounter here, so this once again shows how good X-Flatter is. So as you can see, all the enemies can be spared now, fairly easily. And so it's all about choosing which enemies you want to spare, not because, of the difficulty of the enemy you're sparing, but how easy the attacks are going to be of the enemies you haven't yet spared. So I decided to leave a Haffy, because the attacks are incredibly easy for me personally, and yeah, they're very simple basic attacks that pretty much guarantee me winning. Next up are the Pondmans, the guys you find on the checkerboard, and again, they're not very hard enemies. They're slightly more complex than the other enemies, not very much, if that makes sense, just a little bit of a threat you can definitely die to if you've got bad or unlucky positioning. Luckily, however, after a couple of pacifiers and 1 or 2 spares, all of them are gone. And yeah, just not much of a threat in general. This is, however, where we meet the definition of toxic masculinity. This is what this little man does, because we just punted him earlier, basically. But yeah, this is so masculine and intimidating that he actually caused me a reset, yep. This encounter is again fairly simplistic, there's not really much to it. You just simply dodge a couple of attacks, you deep bow always because the fight ends in 5 turns. And 2 of those turns are firstly him losing his crown, and the other one, he drinks milk, which is, a fairly good use of a turn, especially when you're not really being attacked much. Anyways, I could have very easily done this one without getting hit, but, I feel like because I got a reset to it without, remembering the fight, it was worth putting it a little bit higher on the difficulty rating, but yeah, it shouldn't exactly be a run-ender for literally anyone with fingers. So here's a neat little trick for the rabbits in the, I believe it's the forest area. You can simply walk away from the bushes whilst they come out, because they do jump at you, but they don't home on you, so they're fairly easy to combat. Again, that's one of the very easy, examples of these tricks. This game is not flawed because I'm pretty sure they're intended ways of dodging things, you know, especially for speedrunning, which Toby definitely does recognise. But it's just interesting to see sometimes. And anyways, we have another, well, I believe this to be a mini-boss coming up next, Clover. But it's another incredibly easy fight. You literally just do the Rousey options, I believe. And then you're pretty much good to spur or pacify the boss, I don't remember which. Again, the good thing about these enemies is that their attacks are incredibly short. And once you do something much harder, you realise how short these attacks are, which is what makes them so easy. Obviously, a lot of the difficulty in this game comes from attrition. So even if attack is not very difficult, if it's long, then you've got a very high chance of getting hit to it. But until that moment comes, we're good to just keep pacifying everything and, you know, beating everything fairly easily. Here's another example of us dodging enemies, by the way, just the Bloxers. Kind of an annoying enemy, actually. I don't believe we have to fight a single Bloxer in our entire run. But yeah, those would be annoying enemies if you couldn't avoid them. Anyways, while we're in this dancing spinner, or whatever these things are called, well, this area yields us another part to the broken key, which is obviously used for Jebel later on in this run. By the way, this little rabbit that you see on screen right now, I hate this guy. This guy is an absolute buffoon. You'll see why in about 2 resets, I think. And speaking of things I hate, here's this beta male version of the real Star Walker. See, he's just a fake. And here's what happens if you don't manage to get through in time. The Rabbit Trio, this is basically like a Mega Flowey. It's basically impossible to dodge. Yeah, no chance of dodging it, goodbye. And luckily you can skip them. To be fair, I only had a few resets throughout the entire run, save for one particular obstacle. But a lot of it is just silly things that shouldn't kill you in the first place, but, you know, you're just in the wrong position at the wrong time. You know how it is. Honestly, though, it's so fun to just play through Deltarune again. It may sound really dumb, because, you know, I've played Chapter 2 relatively recently, but this game is just so fun. It doesn't make sense to me how fun it is. And yeah, it's very basic, but honestly, the simplicity definitely contributes to how good it is. By the way, this might be a bit of a bizarre choice, but I've decided to group this maze part as one obstacle. I didn't die to it at all, and you'll notice that anything I don't die to, I don't really give more than a 4 in terms of difficulty. That's not objective, that is just like, if I don't die to it, then, you know, it's probably not all that difficult. And to be fair, this is one of the longer parts, because, you know, there's a lot of different enemies, a lot of different traps and stuff. And here in particular, when the beta male Star Walkers are here, I actually almost die, because, you know, really unlucky positioning. But I just about make it through, and that's the area done. Anyways, now to show you guys another little trick. So I skip out the part where I make this robot, or the thrashing machine, whatever you want to call it. I decided to make it a duck, and there's a very good reason for that in the Chapter 2 video that you guys will see. It doesn't really mean much yet, but it definitely will, and instead you fight Susie and Lancer. So, this is actually a very intimidating fight, believe it or not. I didn't know how to do this fight, and so it was incredibly difficult, because Susie and Lancer have a tag team attack, where they both attack, and it is so difficult to dodge. I might try and find footage of it somewhere if I can. But the only way of dodging it is making Susie sleep straight away, and basically just praising Lancer for the other turns. This attack Susie does is not bad, but the tag team attack is pretty much unavoidable. Unless you're incredibly lucky, so I just make Susie sleep all the time, even though it lengthens the fight a fair amount. Aside from that, it's literally just a repeat of Lance's first fight, you know, very, very easy. And once you compliment him enough, he basically falls in love with you, and then the fight ends. Also, quite possibly the best character in the entire franchise has joined the party, along with Candy and probably some daddy issues. Anyways, speaking of daddy issues, we've got another little dodging part to do here, where Lancer decides to abandon us. Now, this may sound really stupid actually, but this is probably the hardest individual threat in Chapter 1. I called it the Royal Guard, I didn't really know what to call this. And, you know, it's fairly easy to dodge, like, the attacks don't come at you very fast, but if you got unlucky positioning of the diamonds, this could definitely kill you. Like, it doesn't really make sense here now, because I got quite good luck. But, like, I almost died at the very end there, and, well, not died, but, like, getting hit, and that would have been a run ender. But that's the randomness aspect of this game kicking in. There are some things you can't really control, and that's where the trial and error comes in.
Man, I'm dead.
Anyways, at this stage of the game, you and Rousey are locked in a cage, admiring how cool you both are for not taking a single hit, while Susie's sweet-talking guards and, you know, doing her own thing. And this peculiar turn of events leads us to one of the easier encounters of the game, but one of the more hard-hitting ones. Lancer versus Susie, you know, a fairly interesting idea, but it should be easy enough. And the bizarre gimmick of this fight, and it's why it's kind of a weird line, you don't actually act in this fight. Susie just attacks on her own volition and you dodge. But I decided to define this fight as a battle because, you know, you're still in like a battle format. You just don't make the options and choose, Susie does. This fight would actually be kind of difficult because there are a lot of projectiles to dodge. But I believe Lancer stops attacking after 3 or 4 attacks rather than the 7 or 8 he does in total. Or something like that. Again, just stuff like that makes it fairly easy. And it would be a little bit difficult, maybe like a 4, but... Again, the attacks aren't complex enough to be that high up. Honestly though, playing it back, Chapter 1 is so incredibly easy in comparison to Chapter 2. Like, this run took about 4 hours to record, but the entire like game, apart from one particular boss, took me about 35 minutes to beat. And I only had to reset 9 times in the default game. I can guarantee, however, that Chapter 2 is going to take me so much longer to record. That's another reason why I'm doing Chapter 1 as its own separate video first, and then going to Chapter 2. Anyways, at this stage you're seeing Lancer stops attacking, so this means this fight is basically won at this stage. There's nothing he can really do. Susie just keeps kind of swinging at him, and, you know, getting him lower and lower, and eventually she misses, because, you know, she's not actually bad, I think. Oh, by the way, fan fiction, right? Hear me out. Susie's axe is a toothbrush. I mean, look at it, man. It's uncanny, look at it. It's definitely a toothbrush. And Exhibit A, you can't kill anyone with a toothbrush, can you? Alright, case closed. Okay, let's get back to a serious note, because we're about to enter one of the hardest parts of the entire run. And yeah, I mean, Susie sets us free, but I guess we're not free at the same time, because about 3 hours of my life is about to disappear. And just before that, I was really stupid and got attacked by a running ranger without being able to get through to the elevator. Now, these enemies are actually very easy to dodge for an endgame enemy, because you'd expect them to be, like, very hard to dodge, like, similar to enemies of the core. But, yeah, they're just not all that complex, because all they really do is that sword attack. You can also use spare one every single turn, and you can pacify the other, as far as I understand, which makes it very easy. Knowing how to manage your axe and spares, by the way, very important, because Chris is the only character who can directly act in Chapter 1, as far as I understand. That does change in Chapter 2, but for now, that's the only way about it. So just keep in mind when you should be acting, when you should be sparing, when you should be using magic, etc. Anyways, here we are in this absolutely abysmal place. I hate this, and I will be hearing this music a lot, which is not very fun. But we've already got 2 out of 3 pieces for the dark key, or the special key, I guess. And we have to speak to Shaum to get the last piece, and then bring it to Mr. Hammer Guy, who I completely forgot his name because he's not all that memorable. But once you have the key, then you're pretty much good to begin the, yeah. Anyways, Jevil. First of all, you may notice that there isn't any sound effects anymore for the attacks. That's because I was watching something in the background while doing this fight, and I had no audio on, so that's why there's like a replacement track. This fight is ridiculous, and I cannot complain about it being unfair. I mean, there are a couple of attacks that are slightly questionable, but majority of it is just very difficult, very challenging gameplay. So let's go through them. The first 2 attacks are pretty much like random, but they're fairly easy to dodge. This Hearts one can be as difficult as the game wants it to be, you know, can be very, very difficult. The Devil's Knife attack, you know, not all that difficult, but once it gets to the second variation of the Devil's Knife, that changes slightly. Now, you'll notice that I'm trying to get TP throughout all of these phases. The Hypnosis ability is very, very important, because I believe once you do it a set number of times, you can just instantly spare Jevil after he does his Chaos Bomb. And the reason I want to end this fight the second he does Chaos Bomb is that afterwards I'm pretty sure it's just random attacks, and I do not want to have to deal with any randomness. So the goal is to get as much TP as possible, constantly defend, and only use Hypnosis rather than Pirouette. Again, a couple of these attacks are fairly difficult, but it's really just the ones that are random over difficult, because even the Carousel ones that look incredibly intimidating, they get consistent over time. Also, once you get good at this spinning attack with the spades, it looks very intimidating, but I promise you it's one of the easier things you have to deal with in this entire run. Unlike this attack, which, you know, I just die too randomly. Like, I feel confident on it, and then I just die because I'm bad. Anyways, I don't want to speak over the rest of the fight too much, since it is a very interesting battle, so I'll let this one roll out. And in case you're worried about the legitimacy of this, because, you know, it's kind of hard to see your HP on Final Chaos, look at the HP of all of my dudes. 90, 110, 70. So, therefore, we didn't take any damage throughout the entire fight. You've seen the full run-through of this. The reason I included the entire run was just to, like, prove the legitimacy of it, obviously. And hopefully that's a valid attempt for all of you. But, yeah, that's the hardest segment of the game. You know, 250 attempts down is not always the most fun thing to put in. But comparatively to the other grinds I've done for videos, it's pretty fun. This fight is very amusing, the song's great, the design's great, and it's just enjoyable to do, surprisingly. It's just kind of funny how, like, the second most attempts I spent on a boss in this entire run is 5, and the first is, you know, ever so slightly higher than 5. Anyways, alright, we're pretty much doomed here. I don't see us getting out of this conundrum. How are we gonna do this, guys? Yep. Anyways, time for the final normal encounter, I guess you could call it in this game. The 3 head halfies, you know. Again, they're simple enemies because X-Flirt is really good for this. Automatically gets rid of 1 enemy, which is really nice. And the other 2, you know, fairly simple attacks. It's slightly similar to the regular halfie, but they actually have the ability to kill you if you're not careful. I am grateful for the sake of time that these enemies were pretty much the same as the regular halfies, just ever so slightly different. And yeah, these attacks are the same as well, just ever so slightly buffed. As of such, I tried to end the fight in 4 turns. Any longer than that, there's always a higher chance of me dying. Because, yeah, the goal is just to end these fights as soon as possible. Anyways, you best believe it's the end for us this time. This is not going to go well. How are we going to get out of this? Okay. And here we go for the most original fight in the entire game. Are you guys ready for this? Rules card. Absolute degenerates. Here he is with this new face. And yeah, basically this is the exact same fight, but it's even easier because instead of ending it in 5 turns, you can actually end it after 2 attacks. So you simply just greatly loosen the crown every single time, and then there is no threat. You have to dodge this free jump attack, which you just dodge by going left and right. You get the perfect throw again because your arms are absolutely amazing for all the gym you've been doing. You know, playing Deltarune is a good workout. And, you know, these attacks are very easy to dodge. It's kind of bizarre how they just recycled this boss. Like, I get it's just chapter 1, so it doesn't have to be anything too spectacular, but, you know, reusing a fight like this wasn't very interesting. Then again, the rules card fight we get in chapter 2 is amazing, so I'm not really going to complain too much. And with that fight done, it's pretty much time to reach the finale of this run. You know, fairly exciting stuff here. And, you know, this last fight was kind of intimidating me a little bit because, you know, it could be difficult. It's a fight that lasts like 15 attacks, I think. And so that can always be difficult, but I was pretty confident going into it simultaneously because it's not Jevil. And you know what? As the finale to this entire run, I think I want to let this fight speak for itself. So I hope you all have enjoyed this run so far. You know, again, it's not my most impressive feat or anything, but it's been such a fun video to make. I just adore this game so much. And it means a lot to be able to make a video on it. And that concludes the attempt, so I guess we're done. Now, obviously this run didn't take too incredibly long. I believe this was about 4.5 hours of playtime in total. Even though it says 45 minutes on the save points, obviously there was a lot of Alt F4ing going on. But yeah, I mean, that concludes Chapter 1's run. Now, I do promise to get started on Chapter 2 as soon as possible, but I want to see how much you guys enjoyed this video first. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, then feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, I will see all of you in the next one. Peace out, guys.